Struggling to share your faith with an atheist friend? In this video, we'll reveal 5 powerful ways to open their heart to God without arguments or awkward debates. Stick around for number 3. It's the one most Christians get wrong. Welcome to Glory and God's Grace. Here, we stand firm in faith, grow in God's grace, and live for His glory. 5 ways to convert your atheist friends. You love your friends. You care about their future, not just in this life, but for eternity. But what happens when someone you care about rejects faith altogether? How do you share the truth of God with someone who doesn't even believe He exists? It's not always easy, but it is possible. Today, we're going to talk about 5 powerful ways to reach the heart of an atheist friend without pushing them away. Tip number 1. Live your faith. Actions speak louder than words. If your friend sees you living with love, joy, and peace despite life's struggles, they may begin to wonder what makes your faith different. Do you forgive easily? Show kindness when others wouldn't? Stay calm in life's storms? Sometimes, the most powerful testimony isn't spoken, it's lived. Let me give you an example of tip number 1. Live your faith. Imagine your atheist friend is going through a tough time. Maybe they just lost their job or had a falling out with a loved one. Instead of just offering sympathy, you step in to help. You listen without judgment, encourage them, and even offer practical support. Over time, they start to notice something different about you. While others get angry or anxious, you remain calm. When people hold grudges, you choose forgiveness. When life gets overwhelming, you still have peace. One day, they ask, "How do you stay so positive through everything?" That's your moment. You don't need to preach. You simply share how your faith in God gives you strength. Sometimes, the best way to introduce someone to Christ isn't by telling them about Him, but by showing them what life with Him looks like. Tip number 2. Ask thought-provoking questions. Many atheists see themselves as logical thinkers. Instead of debating, try asking deep questions that make them reflect. If there's no God, where do morals come from? What do you think happens after we die? Have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain? Sometimes, it's not about having all the answers, it's about planting seeds of thought that God can grow over time. Now for an example of tip number 2. Ask thought-provoking questions. Let's say you and your atheist friend are having a casual conversation about life and the universe. Instead of diving into a debate, you ask, "Where do you think morality comes from? Do you think right and wrong are just opinions? Or is there something deeper?" They might respond with a logical answer based on society or evolution. Instead of arguing, you follow up, "But if morality is just a human invention, why do people feel guilt even when no one is watching? Why do we all have an inner sense of justice?" These questions aren't meant to corner them, but to make them think. The goal isn't to win an argument. It's to spark curiosity and open the door for deeper conversations later. Tip number 3. Share personal testimonies. People may argue against Scripture, but they can't argue with your personal experiences. Share how God has moved in your life, how He gave you peace in a storm, healed a broken heart, or answered a prayer when there was no way forward. When your friend sees real transformation, they may start to wonder, what if there's something to this faith after all? Here is an example of tip number 3. Share personal testimonies. Let's say your friend is struggling with anxiety and they confide in you about feeling lost and overwhelmed. Instead of just offering generic advice, you share your own experience. "I used to feel that way too. There was a time when I felt like nothing in my life was going right and I didn't know where to turn. But when I started praying and trusting God, something changed. I didn't get all the answers overnight, but I felt this peace that didn't make sense. It helped me through some of the hardest times in my life." Your friend may not respond immediately, but they'll remember what you said. And when they hit rock bottom, they just might be willing to give faith a chance. Tip number 4. Pray for them and tell them. Never underestimate the power of prayer. Ask God to soften their heart, to reveal Himself in ways they can understand. And don't be afraid to tell them you're praying for them. Even if they don't believe, knowing that someone cares enough to pray can leave a lasting impact. "Hey, I prayed for you today." "Wow, thanks. That means a lot." This is an important example of tip number 3. Share personal testimonies. Let's say your friend is struggling with anxiety and they confide in you about feeling lost and overwhelmed. Instead of just offering generic advice, you share your own experience. I used to feel that way too. There was a time when I felt like nothing in my life was going right and I didn't know where to turn. But when I started praying and trusting God, something changed. I didn't get all the answers overnight, but I felt this peace that didn't make sense. It helped me through some of the hardest times in my life. Your friend may not respond immediately, but they'll remember what you said. And when they hit rock bottom, they just might be willing to give faith a chance. Tip number 5. Love them unconditionally. Jesus never forced anyone to follow him. He simply loved them, and that love changed lives. The same is true today. Your atheist friend may not accept Jesus right away, but they will notice if your love is genuine, unwavering, and unconditional. At the end of the day, conversion isn't about winning a debate. It's about leading with love and letting God do the rest. And my example for tip number 5, love them unconditionally. Let's say your friend has a habit of making fun of religion. Maybe they crack jokes about God or dismiss faith as outdated nonsense. Instead of getting defensive or cutting them off, you continue treating them with kindness and respect. Over time, they realize something. They can mock your beliefs, but you never mock theirs. They can reject God, but you never reject them. Eventually, they start to see that your faith isn't about judgment or control. It's about love. One day, when they're struggling, they remember how you treated them. And instead of turning to an empty worldview, they turn to you with questions. That's the moment when unconditional love can open the door for faith. Using these 5 tips, I'm calling you all into action. Remember, only God can change a heart, but He can use you to plant the seeds of faith. If this video encouraged you, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it. And let us know in the comments, what's your favorite way to share your faith? Let's help each other spread the love of Christ.